They say children forget, but parents never do. If you've ever given your life to someone only to be left behind, listen closely. And if you still believe in love, loyalty, and karma, subscribe now, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. My daughter was my everything. After her mother passed away, she was all I had. I raised her alone, worked 2 jobs, and gave up my own dreams to make sure hers came true. Every meal, every book, every step, I was there. When she laughed, my world felt alive. When she cried, my heart broke. But life changes. People change. As she grew up, she became distant. Calls turned into texts, and texts turned into silence. She said she was busy. She said life was moving fast, and I told myself it was normal, but deep down I could feel her drifting away. Then one day she told me she was getting married. My heart filled with pride and happiness. I waited for her to say, "Dad, I want you to walk me down the aisle." But instead, she said, "Dad, it's going to be a small ceremony. You don't need to come." She said I'd be uncomfortable, that it would be better if I stayed home. I smiled and said I understood. But inside, it felt like someone had torn my heart apart. On the day of her wedding, I sat alone in my small apartment. I imagined her walking down the aisle, her white dress shining, her smile bright. I had always dreamed of that moment, giving her hand to the man she loved. But dreams don't always include you, even when they started with you. That night, I whispered to myself, one day, she'll remember who stood behind her all her life. After that day, I stopped waiting for calls that never came. I poured myself into work. I opened a small repair shop, fixing old machines and broken tools. People laughed at me, said I was too old, said I'd never succeed. But I kept going. 1 customer became 5. 5 became 50. I hired helpers, expanded, and learned how to run a business. What started as a tiny shop slowly grew into a full company. 10 years passed. My company was now one of the top maintenance and logistics firms in the region. We worked with large corporations, and I had become a man of quiet success. One afternoon, my assistant came in with a new client file. "Sir," she said, "a corporate couple is requesting a meeting. They're looking for a long-term service contract." I glanced at the file. Her husband's name, my daughter's last name. I felt a chill run through me. The same daughter who didn't want me at her wedding was coming to my company for business? I smiled slightly and said, "Set the meeting." The next day they arrived. Her husband entered first, confident, professional, smiling. "Mr. Harris," he said, "we've heard incredible things about your company." Then she walked in, my daughter. She looked beautiful, elegant, and successful, and shocked beyond words. Her eyes froze the moment they met mine. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her husband turned to her in confusion. "Dad?" he asked. I smiled gently and said, "Yes, it's been a long time." We sat down, and I carried on the meeting like nothing was wrong. We discussed contracts, services, and costs. Her husband praised my company's reputation. She stayed quiet, staring down at her hands. When the deal was done, I stood, shook her husband's hand, and said, "Welcome to my company. I hope our partnership will be strong and honest." Her husband smiled and left to take a call. My daughter stayed behind. Her eyes were full of tears. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I looked at her and said softly, "You don't need to be sorry. Life has its way of teaching us what really matters. She broke down, saying she had been young, foolish, trying to fit into a world that didn't value people like me. I placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "I never needed an invitation, sweetheart. I only wanted your respect." She nodded silently, tears falling on the contract her husband had just signed. That night, I sat in my office, looking at the city lights through the glass. 10 years ago, I was forgotten. Tonight, I was remembered. Not because I sought revenge, but because I rose above the pain. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace, success, and the quiet dignity that comes from proving everyone wrong. She learned that night who her father really was, not a burden, not an embarrassment, but a man who never gave up. So if you've ever been left behind, doubted, or underestimated, remember this: you don't have to fight to be seen. You just have to rise until they can't ignore you anymore. Let your success be your story, and your silence be your victory. This is Sweet Revenge. Subscribe and join me again for another story where pain becomes power and forgotten hearts rise again.